So I just finished prep work for one of the next short films that I'll be working on as a DOP. And in this period of time, I've learned so much because prep is something that I haven't done in most of the short films that I've done as a director or just as a DOP. What I used to do was get the script out and call my friends, hook up, and we shoot. One of the main things that would happen is if you've seen the short films that I've put out, there's a lot of errors, there's a lot of minor things that as a creator, I see that I'll be like, no, man, I wish I could do this better, especially in the edit room. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the lessons that I've learned through prep. So the first thing that happens for me in my system and how I've seen that I like to work is I want to be involved. Ideally, once the script is approved, once we know what we're doing, I want to be engaged. Once people know that there's a direction that they want to go into, that's when I feel for me is the right time for a director to be in contact with me, especially if they want to work with me. And one of the main things when I started working with my classmate was we spoke about things that I like to do, how I like to shoot, how I like to light scenes, and things that he wanted. Because I immediately realized that there can be a mismatch. So what tends to happen is, as filmmakers, as the thing that we want to do is we want to copy paste movies that we've seen, right? We want to make our short film, but we want to base it off a movie. We want to base it off of something, and we want it to be like that. And we try to use as much resources as we have to do that. But one of the things that happens and that's so disappointing is it doesn't turn out that way. And that can be A, because of our skill levels, B, because of budgets and stuff like that. So immediately when we started speaking, I could tell that he had big expectations, but I had to tell him that, listen, we're in film school. We don't have the resources. One of the main things, one of the main talking points was he wanted the look of Creed 3. And I immediately told him that in Creed 3, they used 3 cameras and they used a lot of, they used anamorphic lenses. They used specific gear. So in order to get toward Creed 3, because if you tell a DOP, I want Creed 3, it's like, all right, they used a red camera. They used anamorphic. So what's the most affordable in our price range? We're looking at a Komodo. We're looking at getting like Orion lenses to get that look. So what does that mean in terms of budget? Do you have that budget? And then the conversation begins and it's like, oh no, we don't have that budget. But then it becomes, okay, what elements can we take from Creed 3 that we can input into our film at our budget and at our level? Okay, we can look at the framing, we can look at the lighting, we can look at certain elements, but then we have to create something that's within the budget. So the first step is get to speak to your director, see what their vision is, what are they trying to achieve, can they give you references more than just saying, I just want Creed 3, what other things do you have for me to work with? The second thing that I learned out of the whole process was as a DOP, because I'm a DOP director, I tend to have strong vision. So when I read a script, I can already visualize what the script is going to look like. But one thing that I had to do was step back from having that director's vision and understanding that I'm the DOP. My job is to help the director with what he wants to achieve and how can we attain this? How can we do this? How can I help him achieve what he wants? How can I help him say what he wants? Because sometimes with directors, they have an idea. They wrote the story, they saw the story, but they cannot really communicate to you from a technical perspective, right? So the one thing is, as DOPs, we speak of high key, low key lighting, right? So if someone is talking to you and they don't really understand those terms and they're like, oh, I want it to be warm and dark. And you're like, what does warm and dark mean? Are you saying you want low key or do you want high key or do you want, specific sections to be this? If you say it's dark, I'm thinking Game of Thrones, that final episode. If you say you want it to be, low key or stuff like that. So what you want to do is be able to break down the things that you understand, but put them in a layman's language, right? Show them photos. So, okay, you're saying you want it to be dark. Do you mean this? Do you want it to be warm? Do you want it to, what does that mean? And then you're able to craft an idea off of what the director tells you. So we do a thing that's called tone meeting. In the tone meeting, the director basically breaks down the tone of what they're trying to go for. And then you go away, you come back to a concept meeting where it's like, okay, based on the tone that the director has told you, this is what I think. And then we can panel beat that. From that, the phase goes to, okay, this is what we want to achieve. How do I achieve that? So from the concept meeting, so now we know what the film is going to look like. What are the resources? In this point, you start speaking with the producers. With the producers, it's mostly about what's the budget? How much is there a budget? Is there not a budget? And one thing I had to quickly learn is, because we are DOPs, because we constantly filmmakers putting stuff out of on our YouTube, essentially at zero budget. What happens is when people see your work, they assume you can do this for free, right? So people sometimes they want you to do it for free. Like, I mean, you can do it, but one thing that I've quickly learned in working and making short films and making YouTube videos is it's not free. I'm paying for it. I'm paying. It seems like free work, but I'm investing money. I'm investing time. I'm working my network. I'm using my network capital. I'm calling in favors. I'm doing things to make things happen. So people only see the final result, but there's a payment process to it. And what happens is when people see your work, especially at the level where you're a beginner, it's easy for them to say, hey, So once we started talking budgets, and once you start to realize the actual costs that come with making a short film, things can become tricky, right? So you want to make something that looks like Creed 3, it's okay, so we have to rent out a red camera. How much does that cost? We have to rent out X amount of lenses. How much does that cost? We need a specific form of lighting. How much does that cost? We're obviously not going to try to spend $100 million because probably don't have it. But what we're going to try to do is come up with a decent budget that will give you that look, that will give you specific. Because the main thing with films, especially if you're on something like Shot Deck, it tells you what was used to make it. So that then costs money. Let's say you want to use like Cook anamorphic lenses. It's not out of this world to go rent them. They're right there. Like I did camera test and I was charged. They say that you can pay $500 a day for one focal length of a lens and plus insurance. So you're like, oh, it's very possible if we have the money to get the same look, same feel, same everything that Creed 3 had. So it becomes a discussion with the producers in terms of what's the budget. The budget then determines the outlook of what we can do. So once you're told your budget, we have, let's say, $500, 1,500, 2,000, whatever. You then start to build formulas out of that can get you as close as possible to Creed 3. It might not look like it, but we are now working with what we have, and we're probably going to create a look that's inspired by Creed 3, but not necessarily Creed 3. So you don't want to get bogged down to, okay, this is what they want, this is what I have to deliver. You want to be inspired by the references. You don't want the references to determine the level of work that you do. And your relationship with the producers is very critical because you have to be up to speed. Another thing we had to do was come up with budgets. We were working with budgets. I had X amount of dollars that I could spend. And then you start to go to different vendors and seeing what's available and what's possible. We ended up getting 2 focal length lenses. We ended up renting lights, buying some lights from Amazon just to try and create the short film in a way that is economically viable for us and giving out the best. One of the main things for me was I started getting a little bit tense because of budgets, because you have these expectations. You want to deliver on a project. You can deliver if you have the resources that you need, but sometimes those resources are not there. And then it becomes about stress management. It becomes about how do I put myself in a position to be able to deliver something with delivering. And then I mentioned that camera test. So this is a big point for me. So I went and did lens testing. I tested lenses from the cheapest Sigmas. I tested Sigma Cine lenses to the most expensive. I did Cook's S4s. I did the Cook anamorphic. I did Zeiss, like they have the Zeiss Supreme Primes. I fell in love with this lens. And one thing that I learned was, okay, now you have to decide, right, which lens will you go for, which lens is best for the project. And I remember listening to one DOP, and he said that things like your camera, things like the lens that you use should not determine the feel of what you make, because once you do that, it's a problem, right? These are just things that capture the images that you want to do. They should not determine the look of the thing that you're doing. But for me, what then I saw with different lenses was just how the image looks like. And out of that, I fell in love with the Zeiss Super Primes. You know, most people love the Super Speed. I like the the Supreme Primes. They just look clean. They look beautiful. Like, I think ultimately that's the lens that I'll likely be using because I just liked it. I like the Sigmas as well, because they're just clean. I like clean. And I think stylistically, I started to see my own style start to pop out of there. Like, I just like a clean image, whilst other people like things with character, things that do this, but I'm not really sold on that. I like clean image. So the main thing that I took out of that process was, when you're working with no money, when you're working on the level that I was working on, where you're using photo lenses, where you're using whatever is in your hands, right? It's easy to close your mind. It's easy to stop yourself from looking at what's out there. Because here I am in a rental, and they're like, you can have anything, you can try out anything, and I didn't even know what to try out. So they ended up just giving me whatever. They're actually enjoying seeing my reactions to this gear, like, whoa, there's this, there's that. But there's nothing that stops me and you from just watching videos, doing research. What lenses did they use? What does this lens look like online? And then just listing down, oh, one day maybe if I get my hands on this lens. So you always want to use what you have. Don't let it be an excuse for not making film. But you always want to have an open mind, especially when you get a budget, because then your inexperience shows, right? And you want to always be able to not let inexperience be the reason opportunity goes away. Because then what happens is people will start looking for people who have the experience and people who know how to spend money in order to make a film. And if you don't know which lens to use or which lens to try, then that might be a challenge. But also, experience cannot be bought, right? So for me, that's an experience. It's like, oh, I now know the process of going to a rental company and just trying to, you know, get gear. Like, we've been trying to rent out lights. Like, I just got messed up with lights because I was like, damn, I've never really had to think about different scenarios, because how I light scenes is basically, okay, what do we have? How do we do it? But once you have a budget, it's like all that goes away. Now you can have many toys to play with. So I would say that keep an open mind, watch videos on YouTube everywhere, just see different lighting techniques, write down notes, and then whenever, you never know when an opportunity rises, and you never know when you have to have these answers to these solutions, because that's what we do. That's our job, is to offer director solutions, produce a solution, and that just what makes you unique. With that said, I would say the final thing that we had to do is just come up with short lists and etc. etc. Those are main things that you already have to do. But what I think is pre-production is very important, because it helps you visualize everything. I have schematics, I have short lists, I know what I'm going to do on the day, I know what I need, tools, resources that we need, and we're a week out and we're still planning and you're still thinking of ideas and we're still communicating. And pre-production is a key thing. I no longer rush my short films, because the end result will always look rushed if you do that. So yeah, I hope you take some valuable lessons from this.